Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor. That's our Discord server. Click through on the link that's here in the description. You'll bypass the Apple upcharge, $2.99 per month. I just put some Jimmy Butler updates on there, so you would have seen them a while ago. By the time you listen to this podcast, if you subscribe to Off the Floor, you get access to 10 different channels there, including the host updates, as well as our stage shows. We had Adele and Matt on there yesterday. Those do not go on the podcast feed, so make sure you check it out. Again, it's Off the Floor, $2.99 per month. We want to welcome back a great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, our friends over at All Pro Construction Builders. They specialize in impact windows and door installations for residential and commercial properties. All Pro Construction Builders is a state-certified, licensed, and insured general contractor. They service Miami-Dade, Monroe, and Broward. They use only top-quality products that are locally made. As with so many of our sponsors, they're family-owned and operated. You'll only deal with the owner from start to finish. Big Miami Heat fan as well. They offer competitive and affordable pricing as well as 100% financing with no upfront costs or down payment. If you're looking for a trustworthy and reliable contractor which offers quality service, make sure to contact All Pro Construction Builders. They'll provide you with a free estimate and help you protect your home in less than 8 weeks. So call Danny. The phone number is 305-484-4429. That's 305-484-4429. Make sure to mention 5 Reasons Sports or 5 on the Floor, and you get a 5% discount. And now, today's episode.
Down to Biscayne. Yikes. 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing rubber frauds. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing, got them all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick. And at 5 Reasons Sports, I got Brady Hawk. You can follow him at Brady Hawk 305. Make sure to check out the last episode that we just got in there last night. Myself and Naveen Ganglani, our friend over in the Philippines. He and I did an episode on Tyler Herro making his first All-Star team, only the 4th guard in Miami Heat history to make an All-Star team after Tim Hardaway, Dwayne Wade, and Goran Dragic. So pretty good company for Tyler Herro. Also, only the 3rd player that the Heat have drafted that made an All-Star team for them. Which includes Bam Adebayo and, of course, Dwayne. So great accomplishment for Tyler in an up-and-down Miami Heat season. He has been the one constant. He's been the one consistent player, has been there every night. He's missed only one game, and his numbers are tremendous, and he deserved it. There was a crowded backcourt that he was going against, but the fact that he finished ahead of Trae Young, LaMelo Ball, and Tyrese Halliburton among the coaches' votes tells you what others around the league think of what he's done this season. But we're going to talk about what the Heat are doing and where they're going. So I mentioned Off the Floor. For Jimmy Butler updates, I would recommend that you subscribe there. The one thing I will say is, as of 10:20 on Friday morning, the Heat claim they've not lowered their trade desires here, either in trying to trade him or what they're looking for. So there have been some reports over the past few days that they're willing to take less. They're not willing to move off one thing in particular, which is they're not looking to take salary beyond 2026 if it's not a player that they really like. Okay, so if it's a player that they really like, then they would consider it. But some of what's being offered, and one of the issues here is that, well, the huge issue here is that the CBA is just not accommodative to what they're trying to do. In the old CBA, if you were over the salary cap, you could still take salary 25% above what you send out. You can't do that anymore. So teams are in over the first apron. They can't do that. It's got to be dollar for dollar. And over the second apron, the few teams that are in that situation, they can't aggregate salaries and trades. So it's made it very complicated. This is still looking like a 4 or 5 team deal. But the other problem is to get those teams involved as part of this trade, you have to have draft pick sweeteners, and the Heat don't have those. And a lot of teams don't have those because they don't have their full complement of picks, because basically like 4 teams in the NBA own all the picks for the next few years. And that's primarily Oklahoma City, New Orleans, Brooklyn, Utah. Those are some of the teams that do. So it just made it very complicated, but it does not mean that they're not looking to trade him. They are. They want to resolve this situation. So far, they don't have anything that they like that also works. And that's kind of where we're at right now. But Brady, I want to get into the team as it is. Jimmy is still suspended. I'm not anticipating he plays for them again, but who knows? I mean, in this situation, when the suspension's over, could he come back? I suppose. Could he be suspended again if he acts out again? I suppose. I mean, anything that could play out. But right now, the Heat are the definition of mediocre. They're 23-23. Their net rating is hovering right around 0. They are 6th in the Eastern Conference. The only reason it's not worse is because there are a lot of really bad teams in the East. There are 4 teams in the East that have won 15 or fewer games: Toronto, Brooklyn, Charlotte, and Washington. 4 of the teams we figured would be in that situation. Philadelphia is 11th right now. They're 19-27. They have been playing better of late. They've won 4 in a row. Maxi's kind of carrying them. So it looks like they're going to end up at worst being a play-in team. But then you have 4 teams that are behind Miami. Orlando, which has actually played worse since they've gotten their full complement of players back. They're a game under 500 now. Detroit, a game under 500. They've been a positive surprise this year, but they've fallen off a little lately. The Hawks are in free fall. They've lost 7 straight. They've lost Jalen Johnson for the season now, and so it looks like they could fall out of the play-in. And the Bulls are 20-28 and are still sort of rumored to be selling off players. So, it seems like there is a ceiling for this Heat team, but there's also a floor. And so they're kind of in this spot where right now they're out of the play-in, but it's mostly because these other teams are not very good. I want to ask you, is there any way for the Heat to raise their ceiling as they currently are? Can they be better than a 500 team, and can they actually challenge for one of these first 5 spots?
So I'll say the easy answer would just be to say the guys that have been struggling early in the season, them just kind of somewhat turning it around offensively would kind of help the trajectory a little bit. But I don't even know if that's really going to turn it from being a 500 team to being that much different. I still think they'd hover somewhat around it, maybe be a couple games over. The biggest thing to me is when the Miami Heat shifted, when Erik Spoelstra shifted to this Kelowna Bam Adebayo back front court, it was for defensive purposes. It was not for the offensive pop. It was always about the long term. They'll figure out the spacing, but it was about putting in a defensive game plan to build around. That it hasn't really been there consistently. I was looking back at some numbers, and this is not talking about specifically the Kelowna or Bam Adebayo front court defensively, but just the rotation and all. Like, this is about a game-wide thing. So 15 games sample size has been 15 games ago was pretty much the Pelicans game where Jimmy was the second game where Jimmy was pretty much leading to the suspension. Over those 15 games, the Heat are 20th in defensive rating in the NBA. They're almost cracking top 10 if you look at it in terms of the whole season so far. But when you dumb it down to like this last 15 game stretch, they're close to bottom 10. And that just can't happen with a Heat team. That can't happen when you're trying to lean into a bigger unit and trying to lean into like a certain defensive style. It's not on those guys. Like when I say that change, it's more so on the others in the perimeter and stuff like that. But I do think the trajectory of this team, if they're not defending and if they're giving up this many points to bad teams, it's just not going to work. And nothing's going to change. They're going to be 500. They're going to win a couple of them, scrape a couple out, and then they could lose any game, win any game. And that's kind of position they're in. Funny enough, they are also offensively in that 15 game stretch. They're 25th. But honestly, I kind of expect that. Like with the way that some of these bench guys are playing, the fact that it's pretty much only Tyler right now offensively, and it's Bam and Kalel just working off him, and Duncan has his moments. Like, I don't expect that much to change offensively. I think they're going to have their nights, and then there's going to be nights when the young guys just don't play as well. But defensively needs to be a consistent thing. So I'm interested to see, specifically post All-Star break, when they get maybe a little bit more clarity on the team, when Erik Spoelstra could sit down and figure out what the defensive side of things look like with this rotation. That's ultimately, to me, what's going to change the most.
So you talk about guys who could just play better. I mean, there's a couple of obvious ones. I mean, one is Terry Rozier, and another is Jaime Jaquez. So if I was to say to you, which of the two of them do you think is more likely to return to the form we saw last year. Because people forget that there were stretches where Rozier played pretty well for the Heat last year. He struggled with his shot when he first came over. Then he had like a 3-week span where he was kind of on fire, although doing a lot of the same things he does now. It's just he was getting better results. And then, of course, had the neck injury, wasn't available for the postseason. And Jaime, he hit the wall kind of 2/3 of the way through last year, had the groin injury. But I think we expected better this year, especially coming off the summer league. So if I was to say to you, which of the two of them do you think is more likely to turn it around, and which is more important for them to turn it around?
I honestly think it's the same answer. I think Jaime's more likely. I really do. I just think the young, ability that he has at a wall, but there's something there where I think if maybe I know Jimmy's not playing right now, but I think if there's clarity with the Jimmy situation, he could have a defined role, and Spoelstra gets in the lab where he says this guy is not a spot up shooter and can't be sitting in the corner all game, and they find different spots to utilize him in, where they say, forget the mid-range thing that we said in the beginning of the season. That was more so for Tyler. That was for Terry. You could work the mid post and try to find different things to get it going. Also, getting out on the break, which has been seen a decline since last season. I think there's more of an ability for Jaime to turn it around. Who's more important? Also Jaime, because I mean, this is the long-term guy. This is your young piece. This isn't, even if you're not talking about on the court, it's an asset that you need to kind of put out there and see play well. Now, the other part of this is that who would make the biggest difference right now if they got back to their prior level? That's Terry to me. Like if Terry got back to his last season version, that's more important for this team than Jaime getting back to.
Well, Brady, what's keeping him? Let's ask this, because it's been I don't know, trendy to pick on Terry, right? And I've done it on playback and other places. Like it's hard to watch him play this year. It just is. Like it doesn't seem like there's a fit. The dribbling is kind of going to nowhere. Even when he has a good offensive performance, like you kind of know it's not going to last because the shots are mostly coming off balance. The finishing, he actually had some nice finishes the other night, but the finishing numbers are still not good. Like, what does it look like for him to play well? Because none of the things we talked about before are things we're counting on anymore. The rim pressure, him setting up teammates. Like, what is this even? Is this like a totally scaled down Lou Williams type? Like, what does a good Terry look like in the scheme of this, in the context of this roster?
This is why it's so hard to like figure out, because it's pretty much just making tough shots. That's what he's done his entire career. So it's like the bad shots that we criticize that he misses, like if that gets back to last year where he was hitting them and he was getting and 1 threes in the corner and he was kind of hitting these type of shots. Number one, I think he just has to take more spot up threes. He does, to me. Like I really will push that. I think that's a big change. I mean, I think a lot of us see the open catch and shoots turned into one dribble step backs and kind of see what that leads to. But I know that's his game. But I felt like when he was playing his best basketball last season, it was when he was playing off the catch and he was playing off slip screens and he was just shooting the ball and he was just playing off that. And then I don't know, maybe this is another case. I don't want to make it sound like I'm saying the mid-range stuff is what downplayed Jaime and Terry, but I think Terry also is like, he's not a good finisher. So a lot of the time when he gets in the lane, it's almost those mid-range and push shots that he leans into because he's not a good finisher at the rim. So it's like almost you have to dial it back with him. As much as the data tells you to go to the rim and get more attempts there, I just don't think that's good for him. I think it's better for him to take those. We see him take those like little weird, like gets in the air, pump fake, and like shoot and just throws it up off the backboard. And he'll make those, like, I'm telling you, like he's better in those in between areas where he could just react and do like different type of finishes than just going normal at the rim with these finger rolls. So I really don't know. I don't know what the version looks like. I just think it's him just hitting some tough shots that he was hitting last year that he's not hitting this year. And the role is really hard to figure out because you say if you put him on ball, now you're taking the usage away from everybody else and you're seeing the dribble stuff. But then if you're putting him off the ball, now you're turning him into, specifically a spot up shooter that he doesn't really lean into because it turns into a tougher shot off the dribble. So that's why it's really hard, I think, for them to figure out what his role is right now and trying to find lineups that make sense. But I really do believe if there's anything they could tell him in terms of on the basketball court, saying, we just need you to just off the catch, play off the catch, and just take those shots. Don't put the ball on the floor. I think that would be best for him.
I don't think that's going to happen though. Like it just seems like he has license to do that kind of stuff. So I'll ask you this question related to him, and then the other side, I want to touch on Jovic and Ware a little bit more specifically. Um, would you at this point just take his minutes? I mean, would you give them to Burks? Would you give them to Larson? We've had this conversation on press row a lot. I feel like Drew Smith would have his minutes if he was healthy, right? Like, there's no question about that. Like, Rozier would be sitting.
He'd have a lot of people's minutes. I think he'd be starting. I keep saying that, but he'd have somebody else probably in the starting lineups minutes.
I think so too. And it's crazy that we got there, but if you look at, they could really lean into defense if Drew was healthy right now. That he would be starting with Ware and with Bam. And the question would be, is he taking enough of his open shots? But we saw Drew as a willing shooter and had become a better shooter. After they didn't give you much creation, but again, this is not a lineup that's going to have a ton of creation anyway, no matter who you put into it. But would you take some of Rozier's minutes and give them to Burks or Larson? Because those are really the only two. I mean, is Josh still on the team? Like, it just doesn't feel like, right? Like, we're not even getting updates regularly on that one.
I just think if anything, you have to start with just having a quick leash for him. Because like if there was the last game and you see him in a flow in that game, then you play him in his bench role. But some of these games where you see he doesn't have it going, and then you look at the box score at the end of the game and he has 32 minutes played, and it's like, I just don't think there's a reason for that. So I think on certain nights, like even the Cavs is a good example because first of all, he plays well against the Cavs as we noted, but
yes,
teams like the Cavs you kind of need more shooting against. So it's a guy like Alec Burks probably makes sense for that type of matchup. Like there's certain matchups I think certain guys make sense. We've seen the other matchup a couple games before where Pella made more sense, where they kind of needed a defender on the perimeter. So I think instead of Terry being like, okay, he's a 30-minute guy, I think he has to kind of be on the cusp where it's matchup dependent on how many minutes he's getting. Because I just really do believe that sometimes Pella and Alec could be the sparks that they need. Like it's been seen many times that they've kind of sparked things. So I think they should. I think they should lean into certain things. They've leaned into this like 8-man rotation as of late. Like they've really they've barely gone to a ninth. Like they've thrown a ninth in here and there. I think Kevin Love got 1 minute in one game. I think the last game was Pella for a few minutes. So like it almost seems like the rotation's shrinking when we're saying they should be trying new guys on the outside. But like, I mean, it makes sense. Look, they're trying to lean into this new style. Scoring depth is not their strength right now. If you look down the line, the bench scoring is not what it used to be for this team. So they're trying to just play three guys that they could see find a spark. But if you're going to play three guys, you better funnel in the right three guys is kind of the thing. Because if it's Jaime and Terry that are struggling, now you're really putting pressure on that starting lineup and Tyler and others to like do it all offensively.
What do you think he has against Burks? I don't mean personally, but it's just I don't understand it because it looks like he's the type of player he would have played in the past. I mean, he leaned into Wayne Ellington. When he has extra shooting, he tends to play it. And I can't remember a lot of games I came out of that Burks played this year, and I'm like, oh, wow, he didn't belong. Like, he looks fine. Like, he doesn't – I mean, he's not great defensively. He's not a great ball handler, but he's adequate in both areas. And he's obviously a plus shooter who doesn't need a lot of time to get his shot off. I'm confused at why he's not playing him.
Yeah, I mean, every time he's played 20 minutes – it's
they
been
win.
Like his shooting is insane, and it's like
right.
He's had great games. I think he makes sense for the Bam and Ware lineups. I think they could plug him in there. Why he doesn't play him, I mean, defensively, I think is part of it. And I think the fact that they want ball handlers in some of those lineups, and the fact that he's done it in the past. Like I know he's done it on past teams, but they don't want to lean into him as a ball handler. They want him straight as a spot up shooter for the right reasons here. My thing is so the way to play Burks, in my opinion, is doing the thing that I keep talking about, what they did on that road trip prior, whereas you put the ball in Jovic and Jaime's hands and you play through them. You allow Tyler, Duncan, and Burks to be off-ball shooters, fly off pin downs from Bam and Ware, where they can kind of be a unique version of this offense where it's not straight pick and roll. Of course, you're still going to get the pick and rolls from Tyler, and you're still going to get those little handoff pick and rolls from Duncan. That's always going to be a part of this. But I just really do believe if you lean into Jovic and Jaime on the ball, you get their best abilities unlocked, you get the shooting unlocked, and you don't have Jovic and Jaime consistently standing in the corner all game, which is not their games. It's a little more Jovic's than Jaquez because Jovic has found his shot, but I still want Jovic on the ball. It's 1,000% Jaquez's game because I just don't like this corner sitting that he's been doing. It's just if you're going to play him, that's not the way to play him. It's not going.
It's a broken. Every time that Jaime ends up with a three in the corner, like it's a broken possession in my view. Like it's what the defense.
It's a wide open one because they're
it's wide open, but it's literally what the defense wants. Like they are baiting them into giving Jaime threes from the corner, and I just don't see him becoming a plus 3-point shooter this season. So I mean, he's going to need serious work on that shot and on his confidence. I feel much more comfortable with Haywood in that position at this stage, but think of how long it took Haywood to get there. Like, so I just, again, when the offense ends up with a corner three, like not all corner threes are good corner threes. This is one of these. I understand it's the shortest shot. It's the easiest shot from a 3-point perspective. But if that's what you're consistently getting, it's because that's what the defense wants you to get. And they've gotten way too many of these. And every time we're on press row and we're sitting there and they end up with a Jaime corner three, I'm like, oh God. Okay, it's the same thing as Rozier dribbling in circles, and that's the problem. Is like that's what they're getting off their bench in terms of two guys who can score but are not giving them much in terms of consistency or efficiency this season. I want to talk about Jovic and Weir a little bit on the other side of this. We'll get into the standings as well. Do want to mention another great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. They sponsor our Defending the House segment. Talk a little defense here as well. Our friends Javier and Amanda. You can find them at realestateshopfl.com. That's with 2 P's and an E, realestateshopfl.com. They help buyers and sellers in real estate with they're honest, approachable, smart, and they're nimble and protective of their clients. Based in Broward, but they service the entire Tri-County area. Make sure to check out their Instagram as well, the Fort Lauderdale Realtor. They got a proven on-market strategy. Real estate shop sellers earn the most money in the shortest time frame. So check them out, 954-268-9812. That's 954-268-9812 or Real Estate Shop FL. That's realestateshopfl.com. Here's one thing I think could change the equation a little bit. And even in saying this, I look at the standings and I'm dubious about if the Heat can get out of this sort of mix they're in. Okay, so they're not catching Cleveland. We know that. They're 15 games back. They're not catching the Celtics. They're not catching the Knicks. I mean, the Knicks have found a formula now. They've won 5 in a row, and Tibbs is running them into the ground. 5 of the top 10 minutes getters in the NBA are on the Knicks right now. Okay, so unless they add reinforcements and Tibbs actually plays them, I tend to think they may flame out in the playoffs, although they have the wing defenders, a plethora of them, to challenge Boston. So if those two teams are in those 2 and 3 spots, that's going to be a hell of a series, regardless of who has the home court there. So really what we're talking about is, can Miami catch Milwaukee or Indiana? And they are now 3.5 behind Milwaukee. The Bucks have found somewhat of a game here. I still don't really like the surrounding players around Dame and Giannis, but again, it seems like they found some footing. The Pacers are 26-20. They're 3 games up on the Heat. The Heat have had consistent problems with the Pacers over the past couple of years. I'll start here, and then we'll get into something that I do think could change the equation somewhat. Do you give them any chance to catch the Bucks or Pacers? Because that's really what we're talking about right now.
Not really. Realistically, I don't. Like, I think they're going to be in a position where they win 2, lose 2. You know, they're going to hover around 500. I really do believe for most of the season. They're going to have a hot stretch. They're going to have a bad stretch. Indiana's picked it up as late. I think they lost 2 games in January. Mm-hmm. Like, they've played better basketball as of late too. I think Milwaukee's kind of been trending upward as well, as you mentioned. So it's like 2 teams that are on the trending up, and Miami, who's kind of has this linear line of just, as we said earlier, just mediocre, where they're just going up and down. I do think 6 is pretty much where their spot will be, which is, I think a lot of people don't want to hear that, even though before we'd be happy with hearing they wouldn't be in a play-in. But with the new situation that they're in, minus Jimmy, 6 doesn't sound as great.
And I don't know necessarily that with Jimmy they'd be a lot higher than that. I mean, their record with and without Jimmy, and again, you had some games that Jimmy played, but he didn't really play, but is about the same. I mean, they've been a slightly better with Jimmy than without him, but not enough that I think they would chase down Milwaukee. Maybe they would chase down Indiana. They'd probably be a little bit more comfortably ahead of some of these teams. I mean, Orlando has kind of fallen back to earth after getting players back, which is odd because they survived the time without Paolo and Franz. But now that they have them both back, they've been pretty inconsistent at this stage. And again, the Hawks are in free fall. The Bulls are selling off. I mean, the Sixers are the one team. The Sixers are only 4 games behind the Heat. So I would be more concerned, honestly, about them jumping up and stealing the Heat's playoff spot than anyone else. But if the Heat are the 6, remember, first round, they're going to get Boston or New York. I mean, and so, I mean, if it's Boston, just lights out. Let's just end it. I don't know that a Knicks matchup is ideal for them either. If you, again, I don't know how the Heat would score against them. I'm just wondering, like, it feels to me like they would throw, I mean, you throw Hart, Anunoby, Mikal, Bridges all at Tyler. Like, that's, and then you have to deal with Brunson and Towns on the other end. Like, I find it hard to see the trade or the improvement that's going to make the Heat a serious threat to either. They're not to Boston, but to New York either. Really, you have to almost get into that 5-4 matchup, and then I think take your chances with either Milwaukee or Indiana. But again, we don't think that looks particularly likely. So I think we're headed towards. I think we know what we're headed towards. But I'll say this: I think the one thing that could change the trajectory here a little bit is just consistency from Jovic and Ware. And I don't know that you're going to get either this season. And I think in Nico's case, it has more to do with kind of this constant changing of the role, which we've talked about the entire season, where, you know, he's starting, he's an off-ball player, he's trying to adjust to that. Now, then he's coming off the bench, then they put the ball in his hands more, he's playing with Ware. Now he's not playing with Ware as much. I just think it's hard. Like, when you get good Nico, like, it's really good. But I just don't know if it's going to happen consistently. And with Ware, I think I'm of the mind now that we may have, like, it may become like 2 out of every 3 games he's impactful, as opposed to what now is like 1 out of every 2. But I don't think it's going to get beyond that this season. I mean, could you see either of them making a dramatic difference here?
Probably not for this season dramatically. I think, look, they both had such highs this season. They've had, like, the upside moments, and it's just now, like you said, it's about consistently doing it. Jovic, as you mentioned, 100% I agree. I think the role is kind of the biggest thing. It's why I think they have to, I think, for, like, once they get past the deadline and maybe once they get past this Jimmy situation, I think they need to sit down and define his role and say, this is going to be your spot for the rest of the season. And I know it's not something they usually do. I know they like to funnel things in and out and like to change things all the time. But I think when you're talking about him specifically and the fact he's not a shooter that's coming in and can play with any lineup, like, not saying he can't shoot, but I'm saying like a Duncan Robinson coming in and can play in any lineup. He's a guy that needs to build chemistry with certain players. He's on the ball. He's playmaking. He's running 2-man games. He's doing so many different things. He's pretty much been their point guard in many of their lineups, that you kind of have to lean into that chemistry. It's why I've been surprised. I know I mentioned to you at the games that they've kind of leaned into bringing Jovic in and Ware out, so Jovic plays with Bam, where I think they should lean into that Tyler Jovic Ware thing as much as possible, because that's kind of been one of their best pairings of the season. And it felt like Jovic was playing some of his best basketball when he was playing in some of those lineups, just because he built that chemistry. He had good connection, can find different guys that bounce off of him. So the chemistry, the lineups, I think that'll always change. But if they could find a role, as I said earlier, I think one of the biggest differences is just saying, okay, this season is going to be about young development. We're going to put Jovic and Jaquez on the ball. We're going to let them figure it out. We're going to let Tyler still be Tyler, and he could be on the ball, off the ball as much as he wants. Duncan, we're going to play more Burks. We're going to fly them off screens. And Bam and Ware, we're going to play big. And I think you just lean into that for as much as possible. And like I said, you play through that youth. You let Jovic kind of figure these things out. Where I'm not really as much worried about. I think his game isn't dependent on where, like, Jaquez, we said he hit a wall because teams schemed up against him. There's not really, like, scheming up against Ware. Maybe defensively, pulling him away in certain parts, getting him off his feet. There's certain things there. Offensively, it's just him reacting. Do you want to close out on the 3 ball when he pops out because these jumpers look smooth? And do you want to challenge him up top when they throw these lobs? Offensively, he could still be himself and he could still get the points. Defensively is what I want to see the growth with. Just quickly, I'll say that, like, the stuff where he has the shot blocking ability, he's done good containing. It's more so the fact of these late contests where he'll just get off his feet for no reason. Like, there'll be a guy that's contesting and he'll jump in the background. If they make it, whatever. If they miss it, that's an offensive rebound and a putback, where I just think he puts himself out of position sometimes when he is going for blocks, that they're going to have to tone that down just a little bit and say, just kind of, look, that's rookie. Not only rookie, this guy's played, barely double-digit games here. So, like, he's going to figure this stuff out. He's so young. He's going to figure it out. But I just think more so the scheming against his defensively and offensively.
Well, I think with him, it's just, again, it's correcting his instincts there a little bit. I don't think it's a Hassan problem where they couldn't convince Whiteside to stop doing that because he was trying to accumulate as many blocks as possible. Like, I don't feel like it's a stat seeking thing for Ware. It's just, again, that he's always done this, so they have to get him out of it. On the overall, I think when we talk about this, and it's why this Jimmy Butler thing has taken such precedence here, even though I don't think it would have changed their equation all that much, is that, this team is going to keep circling around this middle of the East, 500, because there is not like the player, because you and I just got through 30 minutes and we did not mention Bam, except in the context of the bigger lineup with Ware, because I don't think either you or I thinks there's this offensive explosion coming from him in the last 30 games. I think we've kind of seen what this is. That's a conversation, of course, for another day. I think he's played better lately. I think there'll be continued adjustment to playing with Khalil and kind of figuring out how that works. But I don't like the pop we've seen from Tyler this year. We're not going to see that kind of offensive pop from Bam this year. I think he needs to get back in the lab, work on taking guys off the dribble, try to develop something in the post that he can go to a little bit more consistently. And I'm going to stop focusing on the 3-ball for him because I don't think that's productive in the context of this overall offense, particularly if you have Ware flaring out. So, I mean, if he has it like in the corner the other night, didn't think about it early in the game, boom, take it. Okay, that's fine. But this idea about building anything offensively around it, nah, I think that at this stage, I think you got to get Bam to being what he's best at just more consistently and then developing some other parts of this game in the offseason. But I guess the overall point is I don't see a player on the trade market that may come in the Jimmy trade that is going to significantly change their trajectory against the East this year. I also don't see them dropping out of the play-in entirely. I think we're probably looking at somewhere between 6 and 8 right now. And if they're 6, and it's Boston, it'll be a 5-game series, unfortunately. I think Tyler gets them once like he did last year. That's pretty much it. All right, Brady, we appreciate it. Check out the sponsors, Real Estate Shop FL.com. Our friends over at All Pro Construction Builders. We appreciate them hopping back on board. If you want to sponsor the show, obviously we always take those inquiries. So just reach out to me by DM on Twitter. Use the 5 Reasons Sports account. I never check the other one. Have a good one.